Hey folks, John Phillips, wrongful death, civil rights, and personal injury attorney, based in Jacksonville, but licensed in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, New York, DC, Texas, Oklahoma, Illinois, for the U.S. Supreme Court and otherwise. I just want to take a moment and address what happened last night, January 29th, 2025. My wife is scheduled to get on a plane tomorrow. I fly, all over the country and am commonly on planes of this exact nature. You're landing in Washington, D.C., you're looking around, looking at monuments. Some folks are already anxious. As flyers, my understanding is this particular flight had a lot of U.S. and international figure skaters that were headed to a competition. So they, are more acclimated to flights in the process. And, one thing you don't expect is for other air traffic to get in your way, and planes are built such that there's warning systems that will either warn or override to prevent mid-air collisions. It's highly unusual that anything enters the path of a landing aircraft. It's secured space. And my understanding and from talking with people this morning is that there was a, Army Blackhawk helicopter with an experienced flight crew who was doing a training certification mission related to night operation. Some or all of the three members that were on the Blackhawk had night vision goggles.
The Army unit involved was Bravo Company 12th Aviation Battalion at Fort Belvoir. It was an annual proficiency training flight. And when we look at the crew, and not all can have been notified, so we're going to withhold ranks and names at this point. We do know on our side who was involved. It was a fairly experienced crew, and that was doing a required annual night evaluation. They did have night vision goggles.
Severely limits peripheral vision. They've got to do checks outside the helicopter. Unlike an airplane pilot that has, vision, just limited vision in front of him, they can't see what's going on behind them other than through radar. A helicopter has more ability to see, and, there's checks and balances with the operation of a helicopter that, of the three flight crew, some were supposed to be letting others know who's checking. My understanding is there were warnings about the two people, essentially two pieces of air traffic sharing the same general path. And my understanding is, again, it was confirmed. The question is whether the Blackhawk pilots laid eyes on the right plane. The typical flight pattern would have been to land in, I think, runway 1, and it was diverted to runway 33 because of air traffic. And so I don't know if there were assumptions made or what happened. And the National Transportation Safety Board is on the scene. They will investigate. We've got to give them time. What bothers me the most about this is all the finger pointing and the politicalization of it, blaming Trump coming out tweeting, saying things that the chief executive officer, the commander in chief shouldn't be saying right now, particularly since there will be joint liability on behalf of the airlines, the airport, and the federal government. It looks at this point that there's a substantial amount of liability as a result of the actions and inactions of the Blackhawk helicopter, which would put this squarely into the, Federal Tort Claims Act type liability. And I'm not jumping to civil lawsuits, for purposes of civil lawsuits. I'm just saying, from the standpoint of commentary, when you have 60 plus losses of life, families that haven't been notified yet, friends and coworkers who, have no idea that their community is going to be shattered, an entire athletics community, figure skating community, who is going to be impacted. It's too soon to be, casting blame related to, government funding and the politicalization of office, right? I want to address that at an appropriate time and say, look, this is when we're going to root out the FDA, FAA, FDOT, all of these entities that keep lives safer day by day by day, and make sure there's no, political, disagreement with our position, and force resignations of workers that have learned by doing and learned by close calls. We're going to have more incidents. We're going to have more food poisoning. We're going to have more bridges collapse. We're going to have more, collisions if we get rid of good workers. But that's not the issue. Right now, it was a training mission gone wrong, communication that could have been better, and the NTSB will do their investigation. In the case we most recently handled, the airline case, we represented over 50 people who were aboard a Miami Air airplane. The airplane overran the runway in Jacksonville due to a host of failures by the Miami Air crew and communications, and landed in the river. And 50 people were injured. Nobody died. Some injuries were, kind of superficial and emotional. Some were surgical and significant, and some they'll never fly again. But here you're dealing with catastrophic loss, wrongful death of 60 or so individuals, where there was this idea that, helicopters and airplanes could share the same airspace. I'll leave it up to investigators and people who have operated in this particular environment to address that. From a legal perspective, I do recommend that the families pursue representation. Federal Tort Claims Act has a very small window of claims and recovery, and certainly I hope the federal government, sets that aside and makes this right, for these families. I hope, that we receive answers, and that people don't die in vain, that they learn from these errors, mistakes, and we fix it. I do worry that our country is too easy to blame one another and too easy to, make everything political, that I don't know how successful that would be. But, as a lawyer who's handled, I'd say dozens, but it's more than dozens. It's not quite hundreds, but, 50 to 100 of these cases. It's horrifying as a person who flies and whose wife's going to get on a flight tomorrow. You get to a point where, and particularly in America, where flying has been safe, way safer than driving a car statistically. And then you see something like this and realize all it takes is once, and you have a entire just community after community, which is destroyed. And I've represented people in Wichita, Kansas. I've represented people in Washington, D.C. And those folks are going to be destroyed over this. So I just caution, people before they're, saying, well, but there's furloughs and recommended retirements and the federal government, blah, blah, blah. Like, just hold on. There'll be time for you to espouse your opinion about politics. But right now we have 60 people plus who have lost their lives. And we've got first responders who are doing a body recovery mission to notify next of kin, many of which I suspect some will be international based upon the nature of what I've heard about this flight and who was on it. And so there's a lot to communicate. The Department of Defense released a statement today saying that, they haven't even fully communicated with those three individuals' families. And the nature of the military, they don't know their families necessarily on a flight. Like some of the people that were on the Wichita to DC flight, their families generally know like my wife, like they're headed somewhere. But in the nature of military service, flying is so common that they don't report it in every day. So it's a very sad and dark day for the country. Let's mourn, let's offer prayers, let's offer support, and let's hold back the hate and criticism for a little bit longer. God bless these families, and if there's anything we can do, just let us know.